Imagine you're stepping off a high-speed train in a brand new country.
Right.
You've just moved. All your possessions are in boxes and, your physical journey is completely over. You feel that incredible rush of accomplishment.
Oh, yeah, it's a huge milestone.
Exactly. I mean, you've physically crossed a border, which is an action that took maybe a few hours and was frankly incredibly easy. You can physically move across a continent today faster than a letter could move across a single city 100 years ago.
Yeah, the physical infrastructure is amazing.
But then you wake up the next morning, you sit down in your new, entirely empty apartment, and you try to actually, well, start your life.
And that's where the illusion breaks.
Right. You try to set up an internet connection, or you try to open a local bank account just so you can buy groceries.
Yeah.
And you just slam headfirst into this massive invisible brick wall.
Because administratively, you simply do not exist.
You don't. You are trapped in this agonizing limbo where you have to endlessly, painfully prove that you are a real human being to a system that categorically refuses to recognize you.
It is honestly one of the most glaring structural contradictions of modern life. I mean, we operate in this extraordinarily interconnected physical world, right?
Yeah.
We have supply chains that wrap around the globe.
Yeah.
Individuals can relocate to new jurisdictions with a single plane ticket. Yet, the administrative systems governing all that mobility, they treat you like an absolute stranger the moment you step across a completely invisible line on a map.
Like you're a total phantom.
Exactly. You become a phantom in the eyes of the state and the local economy.
And that incredibly frustrating, universally understood paradox is the mission of our deep dive today.
It's a big one.
It really is. We are exploring the underlying architecture of modern mobility. And more specifically, we're unpacking why these legacy identity systems have essentially created a hard ceiling on our global digital economy.
Right, they're holding everything back.
So we're going to look really closely at a massive structural reengineering project that's currently underway to fix this. It's happening through a legislative framework known as eIDAS 2.
Which stands for Electronic Identification, Authentication, and Trust Services.
Thank you, yeah. And alongside that, the rollout of the European Digital Identity Wallet, or the EUDIW, I mean, the ambition here is nothing short of revolutionary.
It really is.
They want to turn human identity into the invisible infrastructure of the modern world.
And to understand the sheer magnitude of this shift, we really have to look at the mechanics of identity itself.
Right.
I mean, it requires diving into the cryptography that actually makes it secure and the sweeping policy shifts that are actively rewiring how society functions across borders. Because this isn't just about making a shiny new app.
No, not at all.
It's about fundamentally altering the legal and technical reality of what it actually means to prove you are who you say you are.
So let's start with the lived experience of this paradox, because I think it highlights exactly why this reengineering is so desperate. We mentioned that physical versus administrative reality earlier. You move, you deal with the physical exhaustion of unpacking.
Yeah, and then you're hit with this second entirely opaque burden.
Opaque burden. That's a great phrase from the source material. What does that actually look like?
Well, opaque is the crucial term here. When you plan a move, you calculate the cost of the moving truck. You plan your travel route. The physical logistics are totally transparent.
Right, you can put them on a spreadsheet.
Exactly. But this secondary administrative burden is completely hidden until you are literally trapped inside it. Suddenly, you're tasked with assembling this mountain of physical paper artifacts.
Oh, the paperwork.
It's endless. You need passports, you need utility bills from your old apartment, you need birth certificates with the raised seals.
Yeah.
You gather all this physical evidence, right? And you present it to an institution that will then put you in a queue for weeks.
Yeah.
And all of this is just to verify a fact that you already know to be absolutely true, that you are exactly the person you claim to be.
It's agonizing. I mean, you're sitting in a cold apartment because you can't get the local utility company to turn on the heating. You can't get your first paycheck processed by your new boss. You can't even enroll your kids in the local school system. Your essential existence is just paused.
Completely on hold.
And the part that makes this feel so uniquely absurd to me is the technological context we live in. I mean, we are living in an era where data travels at the speed of light across fiber optic cables. I can initiate a high-definition video call with someone in Tokyo from a park bench in Berlin with absolutely zero latency.
Yeah, data moves at the speed of light. but administrative verification is still moving at the speed of paper.
It's so true. It's as if we have supersonic jets for our physical bodies, but our actual lives, our identities, are still being shipped across the ocean via 19th century cargo boats.
That's a perfect way to put it.
But why? I mean, why is there such a massive disconnect between data speed and administrative speed? Surely these institutions have computers, right? They have databases. Why does the verification process just slow to a crawl?
Well, the disconnect isn't really a matter of institutions lacking technology or, just providing terrible customer service.
It feels like terrible customer service.
I know it does.
Yeah.
But this is actually a foundational structural contradiction at the very heart of contemporary administration. It's the direct product of how national identity infrastructures were historically built.
Okay, how were they built?
They evolved in total isolation. They were built to be deeply sovereign, strictly contained within their own physical borders, and heavily, heavily siloed.
So that brings us to the architecture of national identity systems. The source material refers to this as fragmented national identity.
Exactly.
So before these incoming eIDAS 2 reforms, digital identity systems were essentially just isolated islands.
Yeah, think of it like a digital Tower of Babel. Over the past couple of decades, as governments modernized, every single nation built its own internal system for verifying its citizens digitally.
Right.
But they built them using entirely different architectural philosophies. They used different underlying databases, completely different legal frameworks. They were designed specifically not to talk to anyone else.
They were mutually unintelligible.
Exactly.
Let's ground this in a specific scenario so you, the listener, can really picture it. Imagine a German citizen who happens to hold an Italian digital credential. Maybe they acquired this credential while living or working in Italy for a few years. It's highly secure. It works perfectly well for Italian administration.
Right. It's a completely valid digital ID.
Right. So now they move back and they try to use that Italian digital credential to log into a German tax portal. You would reasonably assume, okay, these are both advanced digital systems in neighboring European countries. Obviously, they can communicate.
But they can't. The portal is completely unable to interpret it.
The underlying code literally does not speak the same language.
And because that code cannot communicate, the German system treats the Italian credential as if it just doesn't exist. It doesn't matter how robust or secure the Italian verification process was.
The computer just says no.
Yep. The user is forced to completely abandon their established digital identity and restart the entire verification process from scratch in Germany. It entirely shatters the illusion that we operate in a unified digital space. I mean, a credential that has been painstakingly vetted and secured in one jurisdiction is effectively meaningless the absolute second it encounters a different jurisdiction's firewall.
Okay, hold on. I'm struggling with this foundational premise a little bit.
Okay, sure.
Proving who you are seems incredibly straightforward to me. It's a binary state. I am either myself or I am a fraudulent imposter. Why does the code need to, speak a language or negotiate trust? Isn't it just a simple database query like, does this person match the record, yes or no?
That is a very, very common assumption. But identity verification is absolutely not a binary concept.
It's not.
No, it is a vast continuum. The system doesn't just ask, is this you? It asks, to what degree of mathematical and legal certainty can we prove this is you? There's a sliding scale of assurance levels, and this is exactly where the fragmentation becomes a total nightmare.
Okay, walk me through this sliding scale. How does the level of assurance actually change depending on what I'm trying to do?
Well, consider the different thresholds of certainty required for different societal actions. If you are logging into a municipal message board to complain about a pothole on your street, the risk of fraud is incredibly low.
Right, nobody cares if someone hacks my pothole complaint.
Exactly. So for that, a basic password and maybe a quick SMS text code sent to your phone might be perfectly adequate. The system operates on a very low level of assurance.
Okay, that makes sense.
But if you are trying to open a corporate bank account or access highly sensitive psychiatric medical records, an SMS code is nowhere near secure enough. The required threshold of certainty skyrockets.
Right.
So to meet that high level of assurance, a system might demand biometric passport scanning, real-time facial recognition matching, and perhaps even a live video interview with a verification officer.
Okay, so it's not just a matter of claiming an identity. It's about satisfying the specific risk appetite of the institution you are interacting with.
Precisely. Now, multiply that complexity by different sovereign nations. Historically, every country independently decided what constituted a low, substantial, or high level of assurance.
Oh, I see.
They applied entirely different technical standards and legal definitions to that sliding scale. So when an Italian credential approaches a German portal, the German portal isn't just saying, I don't recognize the code. It's saying, I have no legal mechanism to evaluate the assurance level of your vetting process.
Like, I don't know if your definition of high security matches my definition.
Exactly. I don't know if your high security is the same as my high security.
And that creates a profound environment of legal uncertainty,
Yeah.
especially in regulated sectors where trust isn't just a corporate buzzword, it is a strict legally mandated requirement.
It is foundational. If a bank in France cannot legally trust the assurance level of a Spanish digital credential because the national standards don't perfectly align, that bank cannot do business with that individual digitally. They're literally barred by compliance laws.
Which means this lack of communication, this fragmentation we're talking about, isn't just an annoyance for a person trying to get their internet hooked up.
No.
It is fundamentally strangling cross-border business. It creates what the source calls a hard ceiling on the digital economy.
The structural contradiction manifests as severe economic damage. Because of these technical inconsistencies and the resulting legal uncertainties, we see a massive, unavoidable proliferation of duplicated compliance processes.
People doing the same paperwork over and over.
Yes. Businesses and individuals are routinely forced to repeat complex, costly identity verification procedures in every single jurisdiction they interact with. And when the digital systems fail to interoperate, there's only one fallback.
They revert to paper.
They fall right back on antiquated paper-based procedures.
Let's explore an incredibly vivid, painful saga from the material that perfectly encapsulates this hard economic ceiling. Imagine a highly skilled software architect living in France. She secures a lucrative contract with a technology firm based in Spain. Now, in a functioning, fully realized digital economy, she should be able to transmit her professional credentials, digitally sign her employment contract, verify her tax residency, and, start writing code that exact same afternoon.
That is the whole promise of the digital age.
Right. But the reality of fragmented identity shatters that timeline immediately. The Spanish company's human resources and compliance systems cannot simply accept her French digital tax ID or her local digital credentials.
Because the systems do not interoperate. And legally, the Spanish firm cannot absorb the risk of accepting an unverified foreign digital token.
So instead of sitting at her computer and working, she has to physically leave her house. She has to gather her paper utility bills, her physical passport, and her printed tax documents.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
It really is. She has to travel to a notary public in France. She has to sit in an office, present these documents, and pay out of pocket to have the notary physically stamp and sign a piece of paper certifying that these copies are legitimate.
But the friction doesn't stop there, because a French notary stamp holds no automatic legal weight in Spain. So she then has to take these notarized documents and obtain an apostille.
An apostille. That is one of those incredibly bureaucratic words. What actually is an apostille in this context?
It's a mechanism born from a 1961 international treaty. It is essentially an international certification.
Okay.
Another government office, usually a higher-level ministry, has to examine the notary's signature, verify that the notary is indeed a legally recognized entity, and then attach a secondary certificate, the apostille, to the document. It's a chain of physical, bureaucratic trust.
So she's running around multiple government buildings, paying fees, getting stamps on top of stamps.
Yep.
And then she has to put these physical pieces of paper into a cardboard envelope and hire a secure international courier to physically fly them across the continent to Spain.
And we have to look at the Spanish firm's side of this burden, too.
Right, because they have to receive it.
Exactly. They receive this cardboard envelope days later. An HR representative opens it and looks at these documents.
Right.
But they are not trained in French administrative layouts. They don't know what a legitimate French utility bill looks like compared to a clever forgery.
I mean, what is a Spanish HR rep supposed to do with a water bill from Lyon?
Exactly. And they certainly don't read French notarial legalese, so what is the firm forced to do?
They have to hire specialized translators.
They hire translators to read the documents, and they often have to hire third-party verification specialists or expensive corporate lawyers just to confirm that the entire physical paper trail is legally sound under Spanish compliance laws.
This entire process is administrative friction acting like quicksand. And the most crucial takeaway from this whole ordeal is that during these multiple agonizing weeks of couriers, notaries, and translators, the software architect hasn't written a single line of code.
Economic productivity has just completely flatlined.
Now, if I think about the scale of this problem across the economy, for a massive multinational conglomerate, this quicksand is annoying, sure, but they have an entire legal department dedicated to wading through it.
Oh, absolutely.
They have corporate translators on retainer. They have courier fees built into their multi-million-dollar overhead budgets. But for a small or medium enterprise, an SME, this must be completely prohibitive.
That is a very vital economic distinction. For the corporate giants, these inefficiencies are just a calculated, accepted cost of doing business. But for an SME, they act as an insurmountable barrier to entry.
Yeah.
If a small design firm in Madrid wants to hire a brilliant freelancer in Paris, but the onboarding process requires thousands of euros in legal verification and weeks of delays,
Huh.
they simply won't make a hire.
They can't afford to.
Right. They are priced out of cross-border talent. When businesses are forced to continually revert to paper-based, analog procedures just to establish a baseline of trust, the entire premise of a seamless, borderless digital economy is negated.
The digital economy hits a hard ceiling.
It artificially restricts labor mobility, it drastically slows down service provision, and at a macro level, it deeply undermines the entire continent's economic competitiveness on the global stage.
So if the goal is to break through this economic ceiling, you can't just apply a Band-Aid. You can't just build slightly better translation software for French utility bills or, subsidize courier fees. You have to completely scrap the old way of thinking about identity documents altogether.
You have to start over.
Which leads us to the structural reengineering we mentioned earlier, reconceptualizing identity via eIDAS 2 and the European Digital Identity Wallet, the eUDIW.
It requires a total paradigm shift. We have to stop trying to digitize paper processes and start building a native digital infrastructure from the ground up.
Let's break down what the eUDIW actually is, because I think the initial instinct for most people is to picture an app on their phone that just holds a photo of their passport.
Oh, definitely.
But it is fundamentally not just a digital filing cabinet. It's not a simple credential repository. The text calls it a comprehensive vehicle for identification, authentication, and something critically important: attribute sharing.
Attribute sharing is the absolute fulcrum of this entire revolution.
Yeah.
The eUDIW reconceptualizes identity away from being a single, monolithic document and transforms it into a dynamic set of discrete, independently verifiable attributes.
Let me try to build an analogy here to visualize this because it's a big concept. Historically, because of the physical constraints of paper, my identity has been a monolithic block. Let's use my physical passport as the example.
Good example.
It's a bound book. It shows absolutely everything: my full legal name, my exact date of birth, my city of birth, my nationality, my passport number, my physical signature, and a high-resolution photograph of my face. I hand you the monolithic block and you see the whole block.
You can't hide parts of it.
Right. So it sounds like what the eIDW does is shatter that monolithic block into individual puzzle pieces. So instead of one dense object, I have discrete digital attributes.
Yes.
One puzzle piece contains only my age verification. Another puzzle piece contains my university degree. Another contains my current tax residency. And the wallet allows me to reach into my pocket and hand over just one single piece of the puzzle at a time, depending entirely on what the specific situation requires.
That analogy perfectly captures the architectural shift. You are breaking the monolith into verifiable puzzle pieces. And to understand why this is so revolutionary, we have to look at the collateral damage caused by the monolithic block.
Okay.
Traditional identity checks force massive systemic data oversharing just to facilitate incredibly simple, low-stakes transactions.
Massive data oversharing. We are so used to it, we don't even see it anymore.
Because it's been the default for a century. When you use a passport or a driver's license to prove one single fact about yourself, you are involuntarily exposing vastly more sensitive information than the verifier actually needs or, honestly, have any right to possess.
Right.
Breaking identity into discrete, independently verifiable attributes solves a foundational flaw in how our society handles privacy and trust.
But this introduces a massive logistical question for me. If I shatter the monolith, how do I prove that one specific puzzle piece is authentic without showing you the rest of the puzzle to provide context?
Right.
I mean, if I just hand a bouncer a blank piece of cardboard that simply says over 18, they have absolutely no context for where that information came from. They can't cross-reference it against my face or my name.
They just laugh at you.
Exactly. This brings us to the underlying technology that makes attribute sharing possible, the cryptography behind the wallet, and what we can call the end of oversharing.
This is where the engineering of the eIDAS becomes truly elegant. It relies on advanced cryptographic techniques to ensure minimal data exposure while maintaining maximum trust. And a key technology heavily featured in this architecture is the use of zero-knowledge proofs, which enable this selective disclosure.
Zero-knowledge proofs. That sounds like deep computer science theory, but let's ground it in a real-world scenario. Let's look at a Friday night at a busy pub. A customer walks up to the bar to order a beer, and the bartender needs to verify if they're of legal drinking age. Under the old monolithic system, the customer pulls out their driver's license and hands it across the sticky bar.
Right. And in that brief interaction, the customer is engaging in massive data oversharing. To prove a simple binary condition, that their age is greater than 18 or 21, they hand over a physical artifact that exposes their full legal name, their exact date of birth, their home address, their height, their eye color, and their signature.
The bartender absolutely does not need to know where I sleep at night just to pour me a pint of beer.
Exactly.
So how does the EUDIW and a zero-knowledge proof handle this exact same interaction?
Well, instead of handing over a physical card, the interaction becomes a digital handshake. The bartender's point-of-sale system or verification device queries your EUDIW. But the query doesn't ask, what is your date of birth?
What does it ask?
It asks a mathematical question. Does the date of birth securely stored inside this wallet satisfy the condition of being over the legal limit?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Your wallet, operating locally on your device, computes the answer. It then generates a cryptographic proof. This proof essentially acts as a mathematical guarantee that says, I have computationally verified that the underlying data satisfies your condition, but I will not reveal the underlying data itself.
That is so smart.
The wallet sends this proof to the bartender's device. The bartender's screen simply receives a verified yes. They never learn your name, they never see your address, they don't even know your actual birth date. They only know the condition was met.
Okay, I have to stop you there and ask the hard question.
Go for it.
Because if I am that bartender and a customer walks in, taps their phone against a terminal, and my screen just flashes a green check mark and says, yes, they're old enough, why on earth should I trust that?
Yeah, that's the hurdle.
Anyone with basic coding skills can program an app to flash a green check mark. It feels like we are trading tangible, physical, security-like feeling the raised hologram on a plastic ID card, or checking the microprinting for an invisible digital honor system.
It is a completely natural reaction to distrust the invisible. But this highlights the intersection of cryptography and law. This is not a digital honor system. The bartender can trust that digital yes, because the cryptographic proof is backed by the full weight of the eIDAS 2.0 regulatory mandate.
It's baked into the law.
Yes. The legislation itself mandates full cross-border validity. It forces that digital handshake to be universally recognized.
So it's not just a random app someone downloaded. It's a legally binding, mathematically verifiable handshake that the state stands behind.
Exactly. The cryptography, the zero-knowledge proof, ensures that the math is sound and tamper-proof. But the eIDAS 2 regulation ensures that the math carries absolute legal weight across the entire continent. If the system flashes yes, the bartender is legally protected in serving the drink.
Wow.
This dual layer of cryptography and legislation eliminates the technical incompatibilities and legal doubts that created that fragmented Tower of Babel we discussed earlier.
I can see how this universal recognition and a quick cryptographic yes is perfectly fine for buying a drink at a bar. It's a high-frequency, low-stakes transaction.
Sure.
But the economy doesn't just run on pub tabs. What about incredibly high-stakes transactions? What about our French software architect signing a multi-million-euro corporate contract with the Spanish firm? Or what about a hospital transferring highly sensitive, heavily regulated medical records to a specialist in another country? A simple green check mark on a screen isn't going to cut it for that.
Definitely not.
That requires an ironclad evidentiary framework that can hold up in a Supreme Court.
And this is exactly where the eIDAS 2 framework moves from simple identity verification into complex legal infrastructure. To support these high-stakes interactions, the legislation built a comprehensive suite of what they call trust services.
Trust services.
These trust services reinforce the harmonization and provide absolute legal certainty. This is the point where paper-based processes aren't just digitized or replaced, they're permanently outclassed in terms of security and verifiability.
Let's systematically break down these trust services, because looking at the mechanics of these really reveals how deep this structural reengineering goes.
Let's do it.
The framework relies on four key mechanisms. The first one is qualified electronic signatures. Now, people hear electronic signature and they think of, drawing their name with a mouse on a PDF.
Right, which is terrible security.
Terribly unsecure. But this is completely different. It binds a user's verified identity to a document's cryptographic hash, ensuring non-repudiation.
Non-repudiation is a foundational legal concept. It simply means that once you sign something, you cannot later claim in court, I never signed that, or the document was changed after I signed it.
Right.
Now, how does a qualified electronic signature achieve this non-repudiation vastly better than a pen on paper? When you sign a physical contract, security relies on visual comparison. A forgery expert has to look at ink strokes under a microscope and guess if it matches your handwriting.
It's subjective.
Highly subjective. When you sign a document digitally, using this qualified trust service, the system doesn't capture an image of your signature. Instead, it runs the entire document through an algorithm to generate a unique mathematical representation of that specific file. This is the cryptographic hash. It is a long string of characters unique to that exact document. The system then cryptographically binds your highly verified digital identity to that exact hash.
And the level of sensitivity here is mind-blowing. If someone alters even one single comma in that 50-page digital contract after it has been signed, the entire cryptographic hash changes.
The hash breaks completely. It cascades into a completely different string of characters. If a malicious actor tries to sneak a new liability clause into page 40 or changes a payment amount by a single decimal point, the hash fundamentally alters. The tampering is immediately mathematically detectable to anyone who checks it.
That's incredible.
You simply cannot achieve that level of instant, flawless tamper detection with physical paper.
You really can't. Okay, the second mechanism in this evidentiary framework, electronic seals. These authenticate the origin and integrity of documents, but they are issued by legal entities, not individuals. So if a signature is for a person, a seal is the digital equivalent of a corporate stamp.
That is the perfect distinction. While a qualified signature proves that a specific human being agreed to something, an electronic seal proves that a document genuinely originated from a specific organization.
Like who?
Think of a university issuing a digital diploma, or a government ministry issuing a tax certificate, or a hospital issuing a lab result. The seal proves the document genuinely came from that institution's server, and just like the signature, that it hasn't been tampered with since the seal was applied.
Which brings us to the third mechanism, and honestly, this is the most fascinating, almost sci-fi concept in the entire framework to me. Qualified electronic timestamps.
Yes.
The system binds the document's hash to atomic clock-synchronized time. It creates an unalterable mathematical proof that a specific piece of data existed at a precise moment in history.
It sounds like science fiction, doesn't it? But it addresses one of the oldest vulnerabilities in law. In traditional legal disputes, proving when a document was created or signed can be a massive headache.
Oh, I bet.
Witnesses' memories fade, handwritten dates are easily forged, physical mail gets delayed, and computer server clocks can be manually altered by system administrators to backdate files. Time is a variable of intense doubt.
So how does the atomic clock fix this?
A qualified electronic timestamp eliminates time as a variable of doubt. It takes the cryptographic hash of the document and tethers it directly to an atomic clock, literally a physical apparatus that measures time by the vibration of atoms, usually maintained by national physics laboratories.
Wait, literally an atomic clock, like physics?
Yes, it creates a cryptographic receipt synced to atomic time. It is mathematically impossible to backdate a contract, alter a timeline, or claim you submitted a digital form before a deadline if the atomic timestamp proves otherwise.
I am geeking out over the mechanics of this. It's like having an invisible, indestructible, omniscient notary present for every single digital action you take.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
A traditional wax seal can be melted and faked. A physical signature can be forged by a skilled criminal. A digital server clock can be hacked. But you literally cannot forge an atomic clock mathematical proof. It is anchored to the laws of physics.
It provides absolute, irrefutable chronology. And to close the loop on this entire framework of trust, we have the fourth mechanism, registered electronic delivery services.
which provides verifiable evidence of sending, receiving, and transmission integrity. So it's the digital equivalent of certified mail with a return receipt, but mathematically guaranteed.
Precisely. It provides the final chain of custody. It proves mathematically that a specific document, which was sealed by a verified entity, signed by a verified individual, and timestamped by an atomic clock, was successfully transmitted from point A to point B without interception, without corruption, and without alteration during transit.
When you connect all four of these mechanisms together, the signatures, the seals, the atomic timestamps, and the registered delivery, you can see why this fundamentally rewires administration.
It changes everything.
These mechanisms collectively create a digital evidentiary framework that is exponentially stronger, vastly more precise, and infinitely more tamper-resistant than any traditional paper procedure could ever hope to be.
It completely revolutionizes the concept of trust in a digital environment. We are moving from trusting a piece of paper because it looks official to trusting a transaction because the mathematics demand it.
Yeah.
And with this unbreakable structural chain of trust established, we can finally move on to tackling the most complex and nuanced parts of our lives, how we prove our professional and personal qualifications across borders.
This is the phase of the shift where we start mobilizing life. We talked earlier about the eIDAS shattering the identity monolith into discrete puzzle pieces.
Yes, the attributes.
Well, the system incorporates a mechanism called regulated attribute attestations. This is how those individual puzzle pieces get minted and verified by the proper authorities. It allows authoritative institutions to issue cryptographically sealed credentials directly into your digital wallet.
This is a crucial evolution away from self-declared data. Instead of you carrying around a piece of paper claiming you have a degree, the institution that granted the qualification sends a secure, mathematically proven token directly to your device. The authority mints the attribute.
Let's look at some practical examples of how this changes people's lives and removes that administrative brick wall we talked about at the very beginning. Let's look at universities.
Okay.
Under the old fragmented system, a student trying to enroll in a postgraduate program abroad had to request physical transcripts from their undergraduate registrar. They had to pay for them to be printed on special watermarked paper. They had to mail them internationally and then wait for the foreign university's admissions office to manually verify the stamps and signatures.
So slow.
It took weeks, sometimes months, and transcripts were frequently lost in the mail.
I've had that happen.
Oh, me too. But under this new architecture, the student's home university issues a regulated attribute attestation of their degree directly to their EUDRW. The student can instantly share those verified academic records with the foreign university. Once accepted, they can use their qualified electronic signature to sign local housing contracts digitally and use their wallet to open a local bank account.
It's seamless.
A process that took months of anxiety and postage fees is reduced to a few minutes of cryptographic handshake.
The friction completely evaporates. The timeline compresses from months to minutes.
Medical regulators are another huge area. A patient moving to another country can securely transfer medical attributes to a new clinic. No more carrying thick physical folders of x-rays or dealing with incompatible hospital database formats that refuse to import vital health history.
Oh, that's a huge relief for patients.
And then there's professional licensing, a reliance party, which is just the technical term for someone who needs to verify your info, like a foreign employer, can verify a professional license instantly, without needing to pick up the phone, navigate a time zone difference, and call a registrar's office in another country to see if a credential is real.
Let's bring this all the way back to the French software architect we discussed earlier.
Yes, let's do that.
The one trapped in the quicksand of notaries and apostles. How does her story fundamentally change in this new ecosystem?
Let's map this new architecture onto her old nightmare. She gets the job offer from the Spanish tech firm. Instead of scheduling a visit to a notary, she simply opens her EUDIW. Her French tax authority has already issued a regulated attribute attestation of her tax residency directly to her wallet.
It's already there.
She uses selective disclosure to share that specific attribute, just the tax piece, no massive data oversharing with the Spanish firm.
The Spanish firm receives the digital attribute. They don't need to hire a specialized translator because the EUDIW standardizes the data format across all participating borders. The machine code speaks the same language.
That is so key.
And they don't need to hire a verification specialist or a corporate lawyer because the cryptographic seal on the attestation provides an unalterable mathematical proof of authenticity.
So she completely bypasses the notary. She bypasses the 1961 Hague Convention apostille process. She bypasses the cardboard envelope, the international courier, and the
All
translators.
of it gone.
She reclaims hours, if not days, of her life that were previously lost to blind bureaucracy. And crucially, those delays in credential recognition that used to prevent professionals from working and earning a living for months simply evaporate. She signs the contract with a qualified electronic signature, it is time-stamped by an atomic clock, and she can start writing code for the Spanish firm that exact same afternoon.
It's amazing.
This deeply structurally strengthens the internal market of the digital economy. It removes the hard ceiling.
It sounds utopian, doesn't it? A vision of seamless, frictionless digital mobility where your life, your credentials, and your economic potential just flow across borders without resistance.
It does sound utopian.
Yeah,
But, and there is a massive but here that we have to address.
always is.
As utopian as this seamless integration sounds to an economist or an expat, any system that connects our taxes, our medical records, our university degrees, and our core identity into one single digital architecture immediately sets off massive, deafening alarm bells for the average citizen.
And rightly so. Any massive infrastructural shift involving personal data warrants intense scrutiny. The deeply ingrained public fears surrounding this kind of infrastructure are completely understandable.
Yeah.
When citizens hear about a single digital identity wallet touching multiple highly sensitive domains of personal data health, wealth, identity, the immediate visceral reaction is often profound concern about state surveillance and data vulnerability.
So let me ask the hard question directly, because this is the elephant in the room that anyone listening to this is thinking about. Interoperability systems talking to each other seamlessly traditionally means pooling data.
Right.
If my psychiatric medical records, my tax status, my age verification, and my physical location are all accessible through one unified wallet architecture, are we just building a giant centralized honeypot?
People are going to hear this and think, great, a giant EU database waiting to be hacked.
Exactly. Isn't this just a massive database sitting on a server somewhere waiting to be hacked by a bad actor or abused by an overreaching government?
It is the most vital question to ask of this entire project. Yeah. But if we look strictly at how the regulatory and technical framework is architected to address this specific fear, we see a very deliberate structural defense. The framework explicitly avoids centralized storage.
Unpack that for me. Because historically, if systems are talking to each other, they are pulling from a central server. How do you achieve interoperability without centralization?
By entirely shifting where the data lives and how it is verified. The architecture relies on decentralization, strict user control disclosure, and minimal data exposure. Remember the zero-knowledge proofs we discussed with the bartender?
Yes, the math puzzle.
The entire ecosystem is built on that philosophy. Your attributes are not pooled into a massive, vulnerable European database sitting in a server farm in Brussels.
Okay.
The eIDAS operates locally, on the hardware of your own device, likely utilizing the secure enclaves already built into modern smartphones. The data rests with you.
Oh, so it's physically in my pocket.
Yes. The cryptographic verification ensures that when systems interoperate across borders, they are verifying mathematical proofs generated by your device, not trading your raw data back and forth across central servers.
So interoperability in this context does not equate to a centralized repository. The systems are interoperating to check the math, not to read the files.
That is the crucial distinction. The safeguards are baked into the cryptography, rather than relying on a promise not to look at a central database. The system is designed from the ground up to maximize privacy while enabling absolute trust.
Right.
You, the user, control the disclosure. You physically choose which discrete puzzle piece to share, and the cryptography ensures that absolutely nothing else is leaked in the transaction. No central authority is notified every time you prove you are over 18 or sign a lease.
So the goal isn't to build a pervasive surveillance machine. The goal is to build an invisible infrastructure of trust. To replace the fragmented, paper-based, jurisdiction-specific nightmare with a harmonized, cryptographically secured, and highly user-centric model.
That is the ultimate ambition of this structural shift. These reforms, eIDAS 2, the eIDAS, the atomic clock timestamp trust services, represent a foundational evolution in how identity operates across human jurisdictions.
It transforms identity from a fragmented, agonizing headache into the invisible infrastructure of the modern economy. By relying on selective disclosure, zero-knowledge proofs and atomic time. This shift dismantles the long-standing bureaucratic barriers to commerce and societal mobility.
It really does.
It positions identity not as a hurdle you have to clear, but as a strategic enabler of your own life. So what does this all mean for you listening right now? We started this deep dive talking about the exhausting paper chase of modern mobility. We looked at how crossing a physical border is effortless, but crossing an administrative one is like slamming into a brick wall.
The opaque burden.
We saw how isolated legacy systems force us to overshare our most sensitive data, revert to 19th century paper processes, and artificially limit our digital economy. But we also explored the profoundly complex blueprint being built to fix it. We saw how shattering the monolithic identity block, leveraging zero-knowledge proofs at the pub, and utilizing atomic clock timestamps can create an unalterable, decentralized web of trust.
It's a massive, massive undertaking.
It leaves me with a final lingering thought for you to ponder as we wrap up. If our identities, our credentials, and our very existence can eventually be proven mathematically, flawlessly, and instantaneously across borders without ever exposing our full selves to a central authority, will the invisible lines on a map that currently dictate so much of our administrative lives begin to matter less than the cryptography we carry in our pockets?
That's a great question.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. As you go about your day, take a moment to look at your physical wallet, your passport, your paper bills, and consider just how much of your own identity is still stubbornly tied up in outdated paper.
Until next time.